But the other thing is that I've been thinking lately, for several years now, with this fissure, this group that's moving away. I got caught in the thoughts that we are right and that they are wrong. I've been thinking that we're doing church right and they are missing the point. And that's not right. Christian humility won't allow me to think those thoughts. Yet I was. So here I had Rebecca, and I was using my lapel mic so you could hear her, and I had my arm around her, and then she said that she went to Grace Anglican Church. It was God's way of hitting me up against the side of the head. I can't tell you what I heard Jesus call me, but he said basically I missed the point. And what was happening is similar to Peter's revelation of the sheep coming down out of heaven. What I was getting was, okay, so here's the deal. You guys are serving my people. You guys are serving the homeless teens in Vista. Those are my people, and you're serving them well. But so is Grace Anglican Church. They're serving the same exact people, same mission. And Jesus said, I see them as I see you. I love them as I love you. And that's when I realized I really missed the point. And that I started repenting and saying, I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking of them in Christian terms, and I started becoming more humble about this, and now I recognize them as fellow Christians along the way. We may have disagreements, but we disagree on things in here, so we just have these general disagreements. But it was a humbling experience, but an important one. Peter had a humbling experience as well. Peter, being a good Jewish man, he knew that there were certain dietary laws. There were certain food you could eat and certain food that you couldn't eat. And so he has this revelation of the sheep coming down out of heaven, and these animals that are unclean, you're not supposed to eat them. And God saying, go, kill, eat. And Peter did something remarkable. He then quoted God's laws to God. He said, no, we have laws saying we can't eat that. Isn't that great? Peter's telling God what God should think. That's right. And God said, no, you don't get to say what's unclean. I call what's unclean. I can tell you what's clean and what's unclean, and I'm telling you these things are clean to eat. So Peter had this vision 3 times. 3 times before he finally got it. And in that humility, in that place of now understanding that God's laws are interpreted by God and God alone, and God is calling them clean, that his heart was open to love his neighbors that were not of the Jewish faith. And so just then some men come and say, we hear that you're to come and baptize a family of Gentiles. Now these aren't ordinary Gentiles. It's a household that belongs in the Roman Empire. They are a part of the Roman government. The very same Roman government that used a cross to put Jesus on. The same Roman government that has been suppressing and damaging the people of Palestine. It was that group, and it was their household. And not only were they Gentiles and were part of the Roman Empire, they also owned slaves. And God said, go, baptize. And Peter did. It was his act of humility, of understanding that he's not in charge, that it's not about particular laws in Torah that his group of people are following, that God's in charge, and it's God's grace. And that through humility we can see the face of Christ on one another. I find this both challenging and uplifting. Uplifting in the sense that if those Gentiles had not been baptized, I myself, 2,000 years later, would not have been baptized. That we are now a part of God's grace and glory because of Peter's humility and following what God is telling him to do. On the other hand, I am challenged. It is not easy to think that God loves the people I don't like. It's not easy to think that in this divorce that we had with St. Anne's Episcopal Church, that God loves both sides equally. That is a challenge. But God does. So the way to enter into this humility, the way to follow when Jesus tells us in our gospel lesson today to love each other, and that by your love, people will know that you are a disciple of mine. The way that we can follow into that is to first become humble and to accept God's rule, that God loves everyone as much as God loves us. And for as great as it is would be to gather us together and hold hands and look inside and say, we got it right, that Grace Episcopal Church has it right and nobody else has it wrong, God is not calling us to do that. God calls us to let go of our hands, to face outward into the world, and to walk out in the spirit of humility, to love one another as God loves us. And that is our command. As uplifting and as challenging as that command is, may God bestow us with the grace to follow in the humility of His Son Jesus to the cross, to follow in the humility of Peter, who finally listened to His command, to follow in the footsteps of humility and of Christian practice, to become Jesus' disciples.